Currently an occupied country, Tibet is an ancient nation located to the southwest of China and bordering India, Nepal, Burma, and Bhutan. As a people, Tibetans possess their own spoken and written language, culture, and traditions. Their recorded history dates back to 127 BC. In 1642, the great fifth Dalai Lama instituted a unique political religious administration with the Dalai Lama as the spiritual and temporal leader. This system continued with successive Dalai Lamas until the current 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, handed over his political powers to a democratically elected leadership in 2011. In the early 20th century, the 13th Dalai Lama reasserted Tibet's independence by initiating international relations and introducing various measures to modernize Tibet. His reincarnation, the 14th Dalai Lama, was born on July 6, 1935, to a farming family in a hamlet located in TUSRPIntro in northeastern Tibet. Taking advantage of the 14th Dalai Lama's tender age and absence of other leadership in Tibet, Communist China invaded eastern Tibet in 1949. In 1950, at the age of 16, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama assumed full spiritual and temporal powers as the head of state. A Tibetan delegation was sent to Beijing in 1951 to hold talks, but the Chinese government forced the delegation to sign the so-called the 17-point agreement for the peaceful liberation of Tibet, and soon after marched into Lhasa, the Tibetan capital. The Chinese authorities claimed that they came to Tibet to liberate common people. Instead of peaceful liberation, they began to impose communist ideology and destroy Tibetan religion and culture, conducting mass arrests, executing Tibetan religious leaders and other prominent figures, and forcefully seizing control of monastic and privately owned lands. Resistance to the Chinese occupation escalated and quickly led to the formation of a resistance movement. By 1959, Tibetan popular uprisings led to a massacre of Tibetans in Lhasa, and the Chinese occupation continued to cause massive loss of lives, destroy thousands of monasteries, and completely disrupt the Tibetan way of life. The Tibetan diaspora began in 1959 as China's People's Liberation Army solidified its brutal occupation of Tibet. His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama made his escape through Tibet's mountainous borderlands to safety in India. Tens of thousands of other Tibetans walked over mountains and endured long, cold nights of bitter wind and snow to reach the safety of India. In the late 1980s, the Tibetan United States Resettlement Project, TUSRP, started when the Tibetan government was in exile, and grassroots American activists began lobbying Congress for visas to the United States for 1,000 Tibetans living in exile in India and Nepal. To put this plan into action, they had to overcome resistance from the Chinese government's powerful lobby in Washington, D.C., and its objections to the use of the word refugees. The term displaced person was used instead, enabling Congress to fold into its landmark 1990 Immigration Act visas for 1,000 displaced Tibetans. The bill also promised entry for spouses and children of 1,000 immigrants within 5 years. These original 1,000 Tibetans were assigned to cluster sites throughout the U.S. As the 25th anniversary of this immigration approached, this documentary, to celebrate the lived experiences, memories, and successes of the people who formed the early Tibetan U.S. community, its Western supporters, and second-generation Tibetan Americans, began with the help and oversight of officials in the U.S. Tibetan offices, who encouraged their participation in the project.